just briefly back to the question of whether religious belief might not be in any sense defensible. The you have a kind of a spirituality, an ethic that follows from it, and it has to do with kind of kindness toward people and so on. I mean, what if it is the case that either because of human nature or because of specific people's natures, they are not going to be able to lead a very full version of that ethical life unless they have a sense that there's a loving God that wants them to.
Right.
And I kind of think maybe for some people that is the case. I assume, first of all, you wouldn't say that's a validation of the belief. Does it affect the way we should talk about that belief? I mean, do we really need a scorched earth policy against all forms of religious belief? I mean, you would, or to take another example, I'm sure a lot of money went to victims of Hurricane Katrina that was raised in churches, synagogues, and mosques or whatever, and probably some of it just would not have been raised. Such is human nature, for better or worse. How do you respond when people point these things out?
Well, I just don't think we're in a position to know, because it's almost like asking. It's almost like looking at the fact that most of the people who have ever done construction work, in this city, for instance, believed in God. So now who's going to build all the buildings if we just created a lot of atheists?
I think that's a little different. I don't think they were doing it out of their religious. They were getting paid by the hour, right?
Yeah, but
in the larger sense, there really has been nobody else to do the job on so many fronts. Everyone. It's like, one example I give is that everything that was accomplished by human beings prior to 1950 was accomplished by people who didn't understand anything about DNA and the molecular basis of human inheritance. That's not an argument for saying a misunderstanding of biology is a good thing to perpetuate. I think that children can be raised to. One argument I have against religion is that it gives good people bad reasons to be good when good reasons are actually available. We can find good reasons to care about people after a hurricane happens in New Orleans or people starving in Africa.
Although by your own account, the good reasons aren't kind of readily available. What I mean by that is, in your case, your spiritually based ethic has required an immense investment of time, like total of 2 years just meditating, more or less, and discipline. And one question is, how realistic is it to expect everyone? That's the first. I have two questions about that. The first one is, how realistic is it to expect everyone to do that, if that's what it takes to do it in a kind of secular, rational way?
Well, see, that's not required to give you ethics. I think there's an interesting phenomenological conversation to be had about the relationship between spirituality and ethics. But I didn't get my ethics out of meditation initially. It's not like I was raping and killing and lying and stealing, and then I started meditating and I realized I shouldn't do that.
Has it made you more faithful to your ethics?
I think so, but for instance, I took a course as a freshman in college that the total content of which was answering this question: is it ever okay to lie? It was just all about telling the truth and whether white lies were ever justified, and that was a formative conversation for me. And from that moment forward, I had a view of lying that gave me my ethical code about truth telling. With regard to truth telling, which really just transformed my behavior. Can't remember who I was before I walked in the door of that seminar. It's like, I don't know how much I lied, I don't know what I thought about lying, but I know that after 10 weeks of thinking about lying and its consequences in my day-to-day life and the kind of world I want to live in, I knew that lying, but for the most extreme circumstances, the Anne Frank circumstance, like is this little Jewish girl in your house? Telling the truth is a deep ethical imperative, I think, and you can come to that in a perfectly secular way. And I think secular, we could have a secular articulation of really everything that we think may be necessary in religion. Let's say we need ritual, for instance. Let's say ritual is doing something that is absolutely essential psychologically and socially for us. there's no reason why we can't have rituals that are divested of bullshit. That don't require a down payment of irrational false claims to certainty at the door.
Is ritual, in some sense, always arbitrary or irrational? I mean, there's no reason to do any of that. I mean, to do,
Well, no, not necessarily, because, like I got married not that long ago. Given my religious heterodoxy, I couldn't just pick off the shelf, a Buddhist ritual or a Christian ritual. And so we had to craft a secular ritual that was not embarrassing, and it turned out to be, exactly what we had hoped for. There was a way to bring everyone in our lives together and kind of mark this moment with some profundity that didn't require that anyone think they knew something that they didn't know about the universe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My second question about this is, I think I kind of agree with you that if the world is around and in good shape 100 years from now, it will probably be the case that there is certainly among educated people, a spiritually based ethic that is, well, certainly not based on old-fashioned personal theism, a theism based on a personal deity, certainly not based on conventional conceptions of the Abrahamic God. That's kind of my guess. Mm-hmm. And that it will have to do with some of with this spiritual disciplines such as meditation and philosophical insights such as you find in some of the Eastern traditions and so on. But there's also the question of how you get there. And I think I already see, tell me if I'm wrong, I see more and more Christians kind of talking like Buddhists. I mean, and you hear more and more about kind of living in the moment. Some of them are doing meditation. And I can imagine people being slowly weaned off of some of their more archaic beliefs in a way that would ultimately be more graceful than kind of grabbing them by the shoulders and saying, don't you realize how irrational old-fashioned religion is? And even within Islam, you have a Sufi tradition, which at least in some of its modern variants is very kind of meditated, not in all, and not in all of its historical manifestations. But I mean, isn't it possible we want to kind of encourage gradual evolution and do a little less yelling about how crazy they are?
Yeah, well, I think again, there are roles for different voices. I think that's a good thing, and I mean, I stand in a unique position now because I receive thousands of emails in response to my very radical criticism of religion, and I can see the spectrum of effects. I mean, there are the people who are just frankly offended and think I'm the Antichrist, and then there are people who can't buy my whole argument hook, line, and sinker, but they think, now I recognize some of the liabilities of the religious polarization of our world in a way that I didn't, and so there's a modulated effect even of a very extreme and radical criticism, which I'm noticing. But yeah, again, I think, I hope you're right about 100 years from now that we have
Actually, I didn't predict it. I just said if we're around and the world is in good shape.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's, having 100 years where we are this polarized along religious lines, and we have this many people looking forward to the end of the world for eschatological reasons. I think it's hard to imagine we're going to get many centuries into the future.